The static crackled with panic. Hammer 1 is pinned. Pinned. We have an enemy sniper, west quadrant. Elevated. Can't get a fix. 2 down, I repeat. 2 down. The voice of the young lieutenant in the Tactical Operations Center was thin, stretched taut over the radio waves. Colonel Madsen stared at the drone feed, a monochrome map of ruin in the high desert city of Alkame. His jaw was a knot of granite. The red icons representing Hammer 1's fire team were clustered and static behind the shell of a bombed-out market. The enemy was picking them apart. "Where is our air support?" Madsen demanded, his voice a low growl that silenced the nervous chatter in the TOC. "Still 30 minutes out, sir," a communications officer replied. "Severe sandstorm to the south is slowing them down. They can't get a clean look anyway." Sergeant Major Thorne, a man whose face was a roadmap of 3 decades of conflict, leaned over the console. "They're being dismantled. That shooter is a professional. He's bracketing them, walking his shots in. They've got maybe 10 minutes." In the corner of the humming, climate-controlled room, Specialist Ana Reyes sat at a secondary comm station, her official role to monitor and log radio traffic. She hadn't said a word. Her eyes, a deep and steady brown, were fixed on a supplemental screen displaying raw topographical data. She tracked the timing between shots, the angle of impacts reported by the panicked lieutenant, the subtle shifts in the wind speed data trickling in from a remote sensor. She saw a pattern, a rhythm of death that was as clear to her as a musical score. Reyes stood, her movement so quiet it barely registered. She walked to the central command table. "Sir," she said, her voice calm and even, devoid of the panic infecting the room. "The shooter isn't in the west quadrant. He's using the minaret in the east. The sound is bouncing off the government building. He's using the echo to mask his position." Colonel Madsen turned, his gaze dismissive. He saw a specialist, a data entry clerk in a clean uniform. "And who are you?" Sergeant Major Thorne stepped in front of her, a human wall of skepticism. "Specialist Reyes, sir." "She handles comms overflow." He turned to her, his expression a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Reyes, go back to your station. We have experts working the problem." He gestured vaguely at the frantic analysts trying to triangulate the phantom sniper. "With all due respect, Sergeant Major," Reyes said, her eyes not on him but on the map, "your experts are looking in the wrong place. The shot interval is too long for a direct line of sight in that sector. He's calculating for a complex wind shear around the taller structures. He's east." "I'm certain of it." Thorne's lips curled into a sneer. "You're certain? You, a comms tech? You've been logging radio chatter for 6 months. Don't tell me how to do my job. Stay in your lane." Madsen had already turned away, his attention back on the drone feed. "Someone get me a solution now." The dismissal was absolute. A door slammed shut in her face. Reyes held Thorne's gaze for a moment longer, a flicker of something ancient and unyielding in her eyes, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. She turned and walked not to her desk, but toward the exit. She found Corporal Davies in the armory annex, frantically running diagnostics on a set of encrypted radios. He was young, barely 20, and one of the few who spoke to her without condescension. He'd seen the way she broke down and cleaned her sidearm, with a focused economy of motion that spoke of thousands of repetitions. "Davies," she said, her voice low. He jumped. "Specialist Reyes. What's up? It's chaos in there. I need a rifle," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "The M110 in locker 7B. And a Harris bipod. And the Leupold Mark 5 scope from the optics case." Davies blinked. "Reyes, I can't just sign out a semi-automatic sniper system. Thorne would have my hide. Hammer 1 has less than 10 minutes, she stated simply. Their blood will be on your hands, or it will be on Thorne's paperwork. Your choice." She held his gaze. He saw no ego, no glory-seeking, just a profound and unsettling certainty. He swallowed hard and nodded, turning to the coated locker. He pulled out the heavy black case. As she opened it, the scent of gun oil and cold steel filled the small space. The M110 was immaculate but not new. The stock bore a network of fine scratches, a history written in wear. Near the cheek rest, almost invisible against the black polymer, was a tiny, hand-etched raven, its wings swept back. It was a symbol only one other person would have recognized. A man long dead who had taught her to read the wind on a Montana ridge when she was just a girl. She attached the scope with practiced, fluid movements, her fingers knowing every screw and latch by heart. "I need a comms link," she said, her voice a murmur as she chambered around. "Patch my headset into the TOC's primary channel. Read only Davies," his hands trembling slightly, keyed in the override codes on his datapad. "You're in," he whispered. "What do I tell them?" Reyes slung the rifle over her shoulder. "Tell them nothing." She didn't take the main route toward the forward line. Instead, she slipped through a service corridor and out into the blinding, dust-choked afternoon. The base perimeter was a wall of concrete and wire, but she ignored the gates. She moved toward a collapsed section of an old aqueduct, a jagged concrete canyon that the base engineers had deemed impassable. To them, it was a ruin. To her, it was a concealed highway. The air was thick with heat and the smell of diesel. Her boots crunched on loose gravel as she descended into the shadowed channel. Above, the sky was a hazy, washed-out blue. She moved with a purpose that was both swift and silent, her body low, her senses alive. She wasn't running. She was flowing over the terrain, her steps sure on the broken concrete. The physical exertion was immense. Her lungs burned, and sweat traced paths through the fine dust coating her face. She climbed the far side of the aqueduct, her fingers finding purchase in cracked cement. Her boots braced against exposed rebar. She was ascending toward a derelict textile factory, a multi-story skeleton of steel and concrete that offered a clear line of sight to the eastern minaret, over a kilometer away. No one else had considered it. It was exposed, structurally unsound, and outside the established overwatch positions. It was perfect. She reached the third floor, the wind whistling through shattered window frames, and crawled across a floor littered with glass and debris. Finally, she reached a corner window, a jagged opening that looked directly at the mosque. She deployed the bipod, the legs clicking softly into place, and settled the rifle stock against her shoulder. The world narrowed to the circle of her scope. Through the powerful magnification, the city resolved into sharp, sun-bleached detail. Heat shimmered off rooftops, making the air dance. She bypassed the western buildings where the TOC was convinced the sniper lay. Her gaze swept east, past the central market, and settled on the slender, ornate minaret of the great mosque. It was a place of serene beauty, now a perch for a killer. She scanned the carved archways at the top, searching for the telltale signs. A shadow that didn't belong, a flicker of movement, the subtle distortion of a lens. And there, a dark shape in the third archway from the left. Not the sniper, the spotter. He was using a high-powered spotting scope, directing his shooter. In the TOC, they were focused on the trigger man. They were playing checkers. This enemy was playing chess. Reyes knew the first rule. You don't kill the dog, you kill the owner. She took a breath. The wind was gusting from her left, a tricky, swirling current that would try to push the 762 millimeters round wide. She exhaled half her breath and held it. The crosshairs settled on the sliver of darkness in the archway. The world fell away. There was only the rifle, her heartbeat, and the 1,100 meters of shimmering air between her and the target. She squeezed the trigger. The recoil was a firm, familiar shove against her shoulder. In the TOC, a voice yelled, "What was that?" Did Hammer 1 return fire? On her screen, Matson saw no change. But through her scope, Reyes saw the dark shape in the archway jerk once, then vanish. First shot. The spotter was gone. Back in the TOC, confusion reigned. "Negative, sir." The lieutenant's voice crackled. "That wasn't us. It came from somewhere east of our position." High-caliber, Thorne stared at the map. "East? There are no friendlies east." He turned to the comm stations. "Davies, what's going on with your channels?" "I'm getting feedback." Corporal Davies went pale. "Nothing, Sergeant Major. Just cross-chatter." But his eyes darted toward the door Reyes had exited. Suddenly, The enemy sniper's fire became erratic. A single shot, wild, impacted a wall a dozen meters from Hammer 1. Then another, chipping concrete far above their heads. The professional rhythm was broken. The shooter was blind, panicked. He was firing to draw a response, to locate the new threat that had just decapitated his team. "He's spooked," Madsen murmured, leaning closer to the screen. "Whoever took that shot, they took out his eyes. He's guessing now." He straightened up. "I want to know who is on that rifle. Now, patch them through." Thorne grabbed a headset. "All channels, this is Sierra Mike Thorne. Unidentified friendly station. Identify yourself immediately." Silence. Only the wind and the distant, sporadic crack of the enemy rifle. Thorne looked at Davies, his eyes narrowed. "Corporal, talk to me." Davies swallowed. His duty to his superior warring with the promise he'd made. He looked at the faces of Hammer 1, huddled and helpless on the screen. "It's Specialist Reyes, Sergeant Major," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "She took an M110." Thorne froze, his face a mask of disbelief. "She what?" Madsen spun around. "Reyes? The comms tech." He strode over to a secondary console and pulled up her file. The screen glowed with blacked-out, redacted lines. "Her file is sealed," Madsen said, astonished. "Classified by SOCOM." Reyes watched through her scope as the enemy sniper, now desperate, made his mistake. He shifted positions, moving from the shadows of the minaret's gallery to an open archway, trying to get a better angle to scan for her. He was exposed for less than 3 seconds. It was more than she needed. The wind had picked up, a steady 15-mile-per-hour crosswind. She held the crosshairs to the left of his visible torso, compensating for the drift, aimed for the center of his mass. Her breath stilled. The rifle barked. The second shot. In the TOC, they heard the report over Reyes's open mic. A sharp crack followed by the faint, delayed whistle of the bullet. On the drone feed, they saw a puff of dust from the minaret, but nothing more. "Did she get him?" Madsen asked. Reyes didn't answer. She was already scanning. A true professional has a fallback position. She saw a flicker of movement in a window of the building adjacent to the mosque. A secondary hide. He was wounded, not dead. He fired again, a wild shot. She tracked the muzzle flash. Her third shot was instantaneous, punching through the window frame where he had been. The fourth shot followed a second later, aimed at the floor below, predicting his drop. The fifth shot went through the wall of the room next door, anticipating his escape route. A sequence of tactical predictions, each a sentence in a deadly conversation. In the TOC, they were counting. "That's 5 shots," an analyst said, his voice hushed with awe. The enemy was no longer a threat. He was prey. Reyes saw a piece of cloth flutter from a rooftop 2 buildings away. A decoy. She ignored it. Her mentor's voice echoed in her memory. "Never shoot at what they want you to see. Shoot at what they think you can't." The sniper was good. She'd give him that. He was trying to escape through the labyrinthine rooftops. But he was bleeding and he was scared. Reyes shifted her position, crawling to the other side of the factory floor for a new angle. This was her signature. Not a single impossible shot, but a series of them, linked by an understanding of movement and terrain that bordered on precognition. She saw him for a split second, a fleeting shadow dashing between 2 chimneys. It was a shot no one would take. The angle was extreme, the target was moving, and the wind was a swirling vortex between the buildings. For her, the calculation was instant. She didn't aim at him. She aimed at the spot where he would be in 12 seconds. The 6th shot. Through the scope, she saw him stumble and fall behind a large air conditioning unit. He was trapped, but Hammer 1 was still pinned. 2 heavy machine gun nests, activated by the sniper's demise, had opened up from the market's upper floors, pouring devastating fire on the Marines' position. "We can't move," the lieutenant screamed over the radio. "They've got us zeroed." Reyes took a breath. She had 6 rounds left. She wasn't just a sniper. She was a battlefield controller. Her scope swung from the rooftop to the market. The first machine gun nest was behind a brick facade. She couldn't see the gunner, but she could see the heavy tripod's leg through a crack. Seventh shot. The bullet hit the steel leg, shattering it. The gun tipped forward, useless. The second nest was better protected. But she saw the glint of their ammo boxes, stacked carelessly beside the position. Eighth shot. A tracer round. It impacted the boxes, and a heartbeat later, they erupted in a chain of cooking-off ammunition. The position was engulfed in smoke and uncontrolled fire. The remaining enemy infantry, their support guns silenced, broke cover and fled. Reyes used her next two shots to suppress their retreat, not aiming to kill but to drive them back to sow chaos. 10th shot. 11th shot. She made them run into the open, away from Hammer One's position. The battlefield fell silent, save for the crackling of the burning ammunition. Hammer One was safe. They were on their feet, pulling their wounded back, their voices choked with relief over the radio. Hammer One is moving to the evac point. We are green. Reyes kept her eye in the scope, scanning, watching their retreat. There was one last target. Not a person. On a pole above the market, the enemy's black flag whipped in the wind, a symbol of their temporary reign. It was a purely symbolic target, an act of psychological warfare. An impossible shot at a flapping piece of cloth over 1,000 meters away. Her 12th shot. She fired. The bullet tore through the center of the flag, severing the rope that held it. It fluttered down into the dust. The battle was over. In the TOC, there was absolute silence. Every person in the room was staring at the comms console where Reyes's channel was still open, broadcasting only the sound of the wind. Colonel Madsen slowly sank into his chair, looking at her redacted file on the screen. He keyed his mic. "Specialist Reyes," he said, his voice thick with a new and profound respect. "Report back to the TOC." "That's an order." Reyes disassembled the rifle with the same quiet efficiency she had assembled it. She cleaned each part, wiping away the dust and residue of the fight, her movements methodical and serene. She placed the M110 back in its case and walked back the way she came, a silent ghost moving through the ruins. When she entered the TOC, the room went still. Every eye was on her. Colonel Madsen stood waiting, but it was Sergeant Major Thorne who stepped forward. He looked at the dust on her uniform, the faint streak of grime on her cheek, the utter calm in her eyes. He had dismissed her, mocked her. He had been dangerously, catastrophically wrong. He walked to a secure terminal and typed in his highest-level clearance code. He entered her service number. The screen lit up. Reyes, Anna. Sergeant. Scout Sniper Platoon, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. Record, 2 tours. Distinguished marksman. Expert qualifications in high-angle and complex urban warfare. Then, a single line. Incident at FOB Griffin. Record sealed by JSOC directive. And beneath it, her call sign. Thorne's breath caught in his throat. He looked up from the screen, then at Reyes. He walked over to her, stopping a foot away. The entire room held its breath. He didn't offer a medal or a speech. He simply stood at attention and rendered a slow, perfect salute. "Good shooting, Sergeant," he said, his voice rough with emotion. He used her former rank, a title she had earned in blood and precision long before she was a specialist. Reyes met his gaze and gave a single, brief nod of acknowledgement. The crisis had passed. Hammer One was safe. The enemy's hold on that sector was broken. Reyes walked past Thorne and Madsen, past the stunned analysts and officers, and sat down at her quiet corner desk. The job was done. She picked up her logbook and a pen, ready to resume her duties. The institutional machine would process the events in its own time. Reports would be filed, commendations likely written and then buried to avoid administrative questions. But in the quiet aftermath, the truth was settled not by paper, but by action. Colonel Madsen watched her for a long moment, then turned to Thorne. "Get me everything you can on the Griffin incident," he ordered quietly. "Unseal it. I don't care who I have to call." Thorne nodded, his eyes still on Reyes. The woman they had dismissed as a clerk was a legend hiding in plain sight. A quiet handshake would come later, as would a silent update to her file. For now, there was only the hum of the servers, the faint smell of ozone, and the sight of Sergeant Anna Reyes, callsign Wraith, sitting calmly in the eye of the storm she had just ended. Her dignity, like her aim, was perfect. The small, etched raven on the rifle she had used was a secret she kept, a promise to a mentor that she would never miss. And she never did.